Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We are back. Social Confoes returns after, I think, exactly a month now. Last episode was April 11th, if I'm not mistaken. And we announced we were going to take a short break, but we're back now. Shanluk is back from his travels. We'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, Shanluk, welcome back. How's it? You seem to have a
Oh
cold.
wow.
How was the weather?
No, 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 no. The weather was great. I think I had the best weather that I can imagine during this time of the year in the Netherlands. So I can't complain about anything. It was really a family vacation. I got to spend some quality time with my family. So I should be back energized. But oh man, uh, there's a little bit too much to talk about. So I guess we should dive right into it. Actually, I want to talk about something that we were just discussing because you've decided not to broadcast this show to Twitch anymore. So talk a little bit about separating separating for different target audiences because I think that will be an interesting topic to touch upon.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about it. We have my YouTube page, that's standard. We've had a discussion before on whether we should put it on, just my name, the original page, or should we rebrand it to the Social Convos page. We got our Facebook pages, and I think it came to a point like commit to the decision on the personal brand, on the personality, since we're also publishing on your LinkedIn and Facebook, my Facebook profile. I also decided to add my Twitter profile this time because that is, as we are, Jean-Luc Esser and Diego Amirali, we're known as the hosts of Social Convo, so that kind of carries more recognition, more personality, and I think it would reach more specified individuals. Whereas my Twitch is more for gaming content, and there's kind of a disconnect there when every Tuesday we suddenly stream for an hour talking about topics on entrepreneurship, NFTs. Maybe that would fit in the Twitch demographics a bit, but on marketing, different kind of topics. And it just felt kind of weird the last few times I did it on Twitch. So that's why I kind of separated. Or we would have to create a separate Twitch account for this specifically. But as it's my gamer tag, my gamer handle, I decided, that's for gaming content. So let that be its separate thing and live out its separate life there.
So it's really interesting that you mentioned that because I've separated my channels as well. And I think for YouTube it works quite well. For LinkedIn it works quite well. I've completely separated YouTube and LinkedIn from each other. LinkedIn is far more for business purposes. YouTube is far more for entertainment purposes. But here's where it gets tricky. Facebook is where it gets really tricky. I can't figure out between the profile and the page. And if I'm looking now, for instance, there are much more people watching this on the page than on the profile. But then again, when I'm preparing for the book and I want people to connect and I'm at conferences internationally, people tend to connect with my profile. So it puts me in a dilemma whether I want to basically make one of the two in Dutch and one of the two in English. That's just
Yeah,
one of the
that's why I
things that I really
specifically
want to
asked
do.
you, are we going to add the profile? Because we've had this discussion back and forth. Like,
Yeah. So I cannot figure it out. I won't be figuring it out. I will be dual posting until people will be like, listen, I'll go to your profile for this, or listen, I'll go to your page for this. But then again, the issue still remains with Facebook being kind of this like very large, very
like
in formal
overarching entity.
network that it's like, okay, I have to figure out what the approach should be. And I do want to, like, for my profile, go into Dutch, even though I have a lot of international connections there. But I do feel like this is an issue that's only an issue when you don't use your profiles enough. Because aside from lives, I haven't posted on Facebook for quite some time.
Let's talk about that a second, because yeah, we made an announcement post actually, and I'm not sure if you shared it on your channels. I actually forgot to share it on mine, but just looking back, yeah, my Facebook has been a barren wasteland, as in posts. It's only the lives. If you're viewing it as a public, you'll only see the recent lives. Um, we have migrated or used focus our attention to different types of social media platforms the last few months, and conscious decision, we've kind of breaking away from the traditional usages as it was established, and this brings us kind of in this wedge, right? uh, if we're not active on those social platforms and only use it for this live thing, does it make sense? From one side, yes, it's an archive, yes, but from an engagement perspective, from an audience perspective, does it still make sense? And Mitch, welcome. Yeah, we're back. Nice to have you on YouTube. Yeah, coming back to that point, does it still make sense? Because
Well, I think
Twitter makes more
here's
sense
the
now.
thing.
That's the other reason I added Twitter as well, because I am a lot on Twitter now. So that would make sense if I start sharing this type of content as well as Twitter, getting new followers, etc. Other types of engagement. People get to know who you are as well.
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, we don't acknowledge the Twitter and the LinkedIn audience unless they comment. So that makes it difficult as well. Like it's easier to go like a niche specific channel. If you were really into this for growth and community building, we would just stick to one channel. You would do it on YouTube. I would do it on LinkedIn. We would be focusing on that specific audience. We would cater the content towards that audience. We would be posting about it much more than we're doing, because that's also one of the things we just don't announce the show properly enough. We do it for as a live, mainly because it makes it easier in the edit phase, because it's already there. The content's already there. So we record it
It's
and
more
we
a
don't.
logistical issue, problem that we're
It's
solving
more a
with it.
logistical thing. And I think we're right now in the documenting phase over the really creating phase, which is, of course, something that we're going to change, because I do have a direction that I want to go to the next 6 months. And I think that will be provide kind of more like, uh, yeah, it will provide like, we call it handvat in Dutch, like more of a structure that we can work towards. And I think what would be interesting if we really would commit to actually promoting the content and taking the nuggets out, sharing the nuggets with people, and really using the social. I mean, for us, it's still fun. It hasn't reached the point yet where this is like, hey, we
Yeah, it
need to
doesn't become a
create and
chore.
make earning of it. It's not a chore. And I think when it becomes a chore, that's when we back down. And I think a lot of people suffer with that when they do the show, and that's why shows kind of stop. Like we could have stopped. Like after these 3 weeks, we could have stopped. We could have said like, we don't do this anymore. We won't be doing this. But there's a reason behind why we continue, and I think it's good for the audience and the people listening in to know as well what the direction is that you want to go with the social confoes, and the direction that I want to go to. So I'm not sure if you're ready to talk a little bit about that as well, but I think this is a good episode to kind of clear a little bit where the win-win for us still is, and why we still commit to actually taking our time and on Tuesday to host the show.
Sure. So not much has changed since the beginning, at least from my end, as in it's a way to, improve production skills, improve personal skills on conversing, interviewing, networking, etc. So that's still there. It's not it's necessary. It's more for personal growth. On the other hand, so looking at the next 6 months, definitely looking forward to connecting with more new people, especially through various networks that we've established over the last few months. D-Rock was a highlight from a few weeks ago that kind of, yeah, we've had a highlight. We deserve this break. Let's take a breather, reevaluate how are we going to approach it further. Uh, but I think that the challenge I see from a content perspective, from, as you said, we're in the documenting phase, from a creation perspective, is actually unpacking all that we've documented so far. There's a wealth of knowledge, there's a wealth of nuggets, and it's hours of content. And going through that can be a chore, doesn't have to be, it can be a chore. Um, and having a right strategy on how to distribute that. And that's something I think we still need to define. Do we want to distribute it? What's the intention behind distributing it through certain channels? So I think that's something from my end that we need to look at with more clarity and go from that. But the foundation is still there, show up every week, regardless of what happens. That's the commitment we made. And yeah, that's why we're still here. Most shows would have stopped, as you said.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's kind of a very interesting psychological thing to look at, as we're not focusing on growing the show at the moment. And it's mind-boggling actually. Like, people would be like, yeah, but why are you doing this? Do you want to just document? Is that really what you want to do? By the way, I saw Jennifer's like here as well. We have to talk to Jennifer about Minnesota and give her an update, I feel, because we haven't done that either. So I think the biggest issue is that for some reason we don't broadcast the show enough. We don't credit the show enough. And I feel that that's something I do want to change in the next 6 months. It isn't like I want to put it on a pedestal and say like, hey, social conflict should be this or social conflict should be that. But in the end, we do want to have a long-term sustainable community that lives around the social convo space. We do want to build that community. We do want to connect like-minded people, people who have already been on the show as speakers, at least connect the speakers, which is also something that we have done very limited. So I feel like for me, the next 6 months, there is an external motivation to do much more with social confos that we've done before. And it's, of course, the book that I'm writing. So for me, this show will be a way to get information in that will be included in the book that will be coming out by the end of the year. So I think that's a great way for me to segue and kind of pressure myself into making it more of a priority to commit more than just recording and documenting.
Yeah, yes, stacking commitments to each other. And coming back to James Clear, stacking habits. So what one is accounting for the other, accounting for the other.
Separately, it just doesn't work. Separately, it just doesn't. And on the other side, I do also have decided that I'm gonna focus on one habit a month. So where I would usually focus on saying like I have a list of 4 habits that I'm gonna do simultaneously every day. I'm actually still doing that in the sense that all those 4 things are important, but I'm filtering one out for a specific month and saying like this is the first one that I want to focus on and I
What
want to go out
what's the
of.
one for me?
The one for me is going to bed before 12.
So okay, we gotta wrap this up.
So no, but also just after the show, not going on a research rabbit hole or a blockchain gaming rabbit hole or anything that would take me 2 more hours before I actually go to bed. So these are kind of things that I really have to start doing. And I know that sleep is going to be so important for the rest to fit together. And then the biggest challenge that I face is the amount of incoming traffic. And that's also interestingly why I've been very silent on social media, because I know that I'm already being overwhelmed by things that others want me to do, opposed to the things that I want to do myself
Okay, so
after
question for
a
you.
3 week vacation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this was a much needed vacation for you. I can definitely see that. And so you are used to be, depending on how you want to look at it, uh, are a pretty prominent personality in the social media space, right?
used to be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that still carries over. That position still carries over. You're running this company, social media. You're trying to delegate more of that stuff, trying to get more in the background as well. Um, has it helped at all? Because you said there's still more traffic coming at you from internally, but also more internationally now because you're doing stuff more internationally. You got this book coming. You've been to a few conferences. You've had meetup in the Netherlands, in the States. What's the priority now if you had to weigh personal versus personality?
I wish I could give you a clear answer to that. I've been trying to write for my book for the past 2 days, and I've not been able to even touch upon that because I'm either too tired or there are too many things in front of me that I have to do first. At the moment, as we speak, there are at least 3 things that I want to be doing right now, and I kind of feel guilty that I'm not doing them. And that has to stop. So I'm quickly building a structure for myself that I can get rid of that feeling that me broadcasting the show to people that will be seeing the show and wondering like how far along is he with this project which is connected to them. And I think for me that's one of the things that I try to delegate better, and I try to structure things in front, because here's the funny thing: if I use the structure that I've set up in our company, everything goes accordingly. But as soon as I deviate away from that structure that I've set up, it becomes an issue. So whenever
Is
people send me a WhatsApp message, this is a really interesting one. Whenever people send me a WhatsApp message to discuss a certain topic, a certain project, a certain proposal, I have to immediately tell them to send me an email. If they don't send me an email, there will be no follow up. If they talk to me if they give me a call, if you WhatsApp me and say like, "Hey, let's do this," and there's no email, it's lost. It's lost in the barrage of WhatsApp messages that come in over the day, and it doesn't get picked up anymore.
Is that structure because you're still a key component within that structure that cannot be bypassed? Let's call it that.
Yeah, of course. See, I think one of the can you still hear me clearly, by the way?
Yeah, yeah, it's just your
Okay.
video is freezing every now and then, but
Okay.
the audio is still good.
Okay. So one of the things that people underestimate when you build structures and delegate and also empower others to do their part and their USP and their strengths, to utilize their strengths, you can only kind of delegate and move away when you have set up the structure yourself. Like a lot of people, for instance, and this was, I think, we're already talking, I think, 7 or 8 years ago when I first had my first personal assistant. Um, it wouldn't work because I hadn't made a structure that to make it work. So if you want to delegate something or you want to have somebody else help you out with a project, if you don't provide the necessary information, that person will not be able to do the job. If you don't provide a proper structure that's clear for the person what to do in what situations, it won't work either. And I've tried that also with content creation, and you're basically becoming your worst client, as in
Hmm.
a client that wants a lot of things, kind of has everything in their head, but the project just doesn't flow because there is like a big congestion of information and it doesn't come through. And if it comes through, it's too much at once and
It's
not
actually
structured
worse than
enough.
your worst client because you know everything this client
Exactly,
wants.
exactly. So, so that I think is the most difficult thing. And I think for people that really want to do a lot, um, and are kind of similar to I am, it really helps if you have people around you who are structured, who kind of value you as well, because that's important. Like if you work with people that are structured, but they're not able to value your creativity or to value your strategic thinking or value something that you have that they feel less about and feel they're less comfortable with, it's too much out of their comfort zone, and they don't recognize your strength, it's that relationship is going to be broken as well. And if you don't value their structure, it's also kind of a broken relationship. So when you if you're like saying like I'm a creative, my strength is being a creative, I want to have nothing to do with finance or setting up invoices or anything that is kind of like real routine tasks which are hard for you to do, if you don't allow others to do that in their strengths in the way that they can do it best, it's also not going to work. So you have to find the chemistry between the two. And once you have the chemistry, and I mean, you can train yourself, you can train your left or your right brain to be more to have more an equal balance. But you can also say like, hey, my strength is this and your strength is that.
Yeah.
Let's combine the two.
So let's get tactical. One last thing on this, since we're talking about the show, and then we will pivot on to some more fun updates. Um, how okay you have a vision on the next 6 months on especially the micro content on going through
No,
what
actually, our
can
guests. I have more a vision on our guests than actually the micro content. I haven't figured out how I'm going to do the micro content yet. I have it in my head, but actually the
the
operations
structure
of
is
it,
not there yet.
the structure is there. Just the operations of that structure is not in place. So
Okay,
I think that's
we'll talk
the
more about this. So
but
what about the guests?
but I
And
guess
then
okay. So here's what's going on. I'm currently writing a book on how to create an online career, and for that I need a lot of case studies. Now, unfortunately, not all the case studies that I want to do, I will be able to be in touch with the people that I want to write about. But I will at least reach out to everybody that I want to include in the book. I will reach out to them. I'm also not going to guarantee that if somebody's going to be in the book, that they're actually going to be a guest on this podcast, because again, that's not the intention. It's not like, hey, I'm using this book to get people to become a guest on the podcast. No, it's actually, I'm writing a book. I need the information anyway, and I'll leave it up to the people that I'm contacting whether or not they want to do a short interview of 15 minutes or a lengthy interview like social confoes, or even that I just send them the rough draft of what I've written about them and they can decide for themselves
mm,
if it's something that they want to include. And these people include people that have already been a guest on social confoes over the past 1.5 year. It includes people that are quite close to me that we haven't introduced yet to the show, and also people that are a little bit far off and might never appear on social confoes as a guest. And for me, the next 6 months is reaching out to all those people, having the information ready, writing about what the concept is that I want to write about and why I'm including them as kind of case studies in my book. And I also have to know that only one of the three chapters of the book will be about those case studies. The others will be completely different as well. But at least that provides kind of a guideline towards the guests, and should at least next week have a list of 20 to 30 guests lined up that we want to interview for the show.
okay, that sounds good. It's like the whole year covered, the rest of the year. Well,
Yeah,
assuming, just assuming.
it's a very ambitious goal, of
No, but
course,
that's good. That's
as
good. So
always. But
the more we have,
it puts a more external kind of like external motivation on me as well to say like, hey, I have to do these interviews. I have to write about these people anyway. So why not make the most out of it?
yeah, take advantage of the situation. All right. So let's pivot a bit. You went on vacation mostly, but you sent me a photo. You are attending an event in the middle of your vacation. Can you tell us about what that event was? I think you connected with Bo. We had him on a few weeks ago from the Dutch
First of
NFT
all,
community.
Bo is the most awesome person. Like if you thought he was cool online, you should meet him in real life because he was the most awesome person. And he actually made me stay. He can tell the story one day himself, but he actually made me stay at least half an hour longer. I think an hour longer than I planned to stay there. He actually threw me on stage there. Kind of said like, "You can't leave. You have to go on stage first to do a small pitch." And actually, people reached out to me, so there are some guests for the show that have been actually waiting to uh, to get some more information about social confoes, which I didn't do because I was on vacation. But now that we have officially started, it's time to reach out to them as well. And I think one of the interesting things is that it was a blockchain event. It was part of the Amsterdam Blockchain Week, and it was interesting to see how meta this space still is, and will continue to be for I think the last at least more 5 more years. So that was a very interesting experience. There was something which was really cool, the M
Wa-
House,
Was it
and the M
recorded
House had
or was it
no,
just?
no,
Uh,
no, it was like this warehouse where they completely restyled into a creative space. It's like a dream out of like my student years as an urban developer,
I
kind
think I
of like
saw the 3D model
gentrification.
of the space. They shared it in the Discord group because when you send the
Yeah.
photos up, the walls look familiar. I saw the 3D model space in like the browser and you could walk around and it looked really cool.
Okay. Let's go a little bit more geeky on this. I studied urban European urban cultures, which in large part is urban development and planning from a cultural perspective. And one of the things that we did in our master's research was look at old textile mills, like these big textile mills, which are really big buildings that don't serve a purpose anymore because we have passed on through industrialization and are doing different kind of things now. And so these are some big empty spaces that you either knock them down or you have to do something with them. And this location where we were was kind of like this big warehouse. It used to be a warehouse. You could still clearly see how everything was moving in to be a warehouse, and they kind of built it into a quasi museum kind of open space. And um, I was like part of the. I had some memories come back to me from when I was studying urban development. But then in the on the at the bottom level, they had an NFT gallery. They had the exhibition, so there were actually
Like
NFTs,
museum pieces,
digitally
physical and digital.
physical pieces, but digitally engraved. So like a digital portrayal of those pieces were hanging on the walls. So it was like walking through an actual exhibition, but instead of looking at traditional art, you were looking at NFT art, which makes me appreciate traditional art a little bit more, to be honest. But there were some really, really beautiful and interesting pieces as well. So I think it's we're not even close to where we need to go with this at the
Or
moment.
where we
But it's
think we
really
want to
cool.
be.
Yeah, and I think a lot of NFTs are showpieces that you're just gonna hang in your house. And so when you have Hive Punk 5,212, and you go to a space where they have Hivepunk 1, I think that's definitely something that will in the future be of interest. But it
What
will take a long time before we get there.
was that your Hive Punk number? Five two
Yeah, the
one two.
Hivepunk, the Hivepunk that was in display wasn't like a really low serial or anything like that. But there was a World of Women, there was a Hivepunk. I think there were two or three other kind of flagship NFTs that were being exhibitions as well.
Yeah, if you're in the Discord at all, it's been popping off. The amount of people joining the project that's happening behind the scene just goes to show that many people are just trying new things in gaming, in fashion. What struck me is like fashion. It's really picking up as well. I think because it's a form of another form of expression. And this brings me, since you mentioned Meta, there's like a meta feeling there. Talking about Meta, the company, I think it was today or yesterday, Tom Bill, you actually interviewed Mark Zuckerberg, and they were talking about the spaces. And actually, I think it was during that interview that he announced that it's coming to Instagram first and soon to Facebook itself, as in previewing your NFTs. And then a few hours later or a day later, Polygon tweeted that they partnered with Meta as well as one of the chains that they're going to be using. So, thoughts on those developments?
Oh wow, the Polygon story I didn't know yet. The Matic, yeah, that makes total sense. Facebook connecting with Matic is going to be a big, big powerhouse. And this is really, and we're getting back to this story, which is also going to be a small segment that I have to talk about a little bit more. The fight between the crypto maxis and the NFT maxis is going to be a extremely, extremely big one because Facebook or Meta is going to
Twitter is
completely
divided.
centralize. Yeah, it's gonna be completely centralized. It's gonna be a completely centralized NFT space. So that's something that we have to take into consideration. On one hand, it's not that bad in the sense that if you have a central organization as big as Meta taking care, you will most likely, if you take good care, you're less vulnerable to hacks. Whereas if it's completely independent and decentralized. Um, Not necessarily that you're more vulnerable to hacks, but if you get hacked or if something happens, um,
Well,
you really lose everything.
the other thing is actually, why can't they coexist, these two ecosystems?
Oh, they
Like,
will. They will
yeah.
coexist. They will coexist. But the question that you have to ask yourself, and this is a question that's already happening in the world, is would you are you okay with paying the bank to have your money at the bank? So, like in previous generations, if you would put money on the bank, you would get like a percentage in return. Like you would actually get money from the bank for having your money deposited at the bank. And the percentage kept getting smaller, kept getting
Yeah, yeah,
smaller,
that's
kept getting
your
smaller.
rent, your yield.
Yeah, yeah. So the yield kept getting smaller, and then people were like, "I'm gonna go in stocks because the yield for stocks is much higher than just putting it on a deposit at the bank." And then was like, "Oh, we're gonna go into crypto because the yield of crypto is much better than stocks." And then you go to, "Yay, we're going to." So it kind of gradually evolves, but still, essentially, it started with the banks. And what we saw was that the percentage kept slipping, slipping, slipping until it reached a point where you now have to pay in certain countries for
Yeah,
certain banks.
Germany
You have
was
to
already
pay.
like that for a few years. I think Germany, Switzerland was negative 0.25%. You actually pay, and kind of that's why I think some Swiss banks, German banks were popular for wealthy people too. It was more like a security option, as in protect
Yeah,
my wealth, I'll pay you, instead of I need
yeah.
to generate more money.
And then you get to the same point with your data. Like, are you somebody who wants to own your own data? Or are you somebody that says, like, you know what? Let's put my data with Google because if something happens, I can also easily retrieve it. And there's a customer service desk that can help me out with it. So this discussion between like the decentralized blockchain space that says like, hey, we want to remove the power from the elite and kind of have more distributed, more evenly shared society versus saying like, hey, listen, everything's fun and games, but I don't mind things being centralized. I don't mind. I don't know if I told you. Yeah, I told you the Top Shot story that I've spent a year collecting NBA Top Shot NFTs, and then now as a result, as kind of a gift back to
Yeah,
people that, yeah. So for of course you know the story, but for to complete the story for those that are watching or listening, NBA Top Shot is the official NFT
partner.
product from partner for the NBA, for the National Basketball Association, and you can, just like the old playing cards, you can invest and you can buy packs of digital playing cards, and these playing cards are basically videos. And then you have the whole story like, okay, but I can download the video and then I have the video as well, and then I can claim that I own it. But yes, this is where utility comes in. So, for instance, for me being a collector for over a year, I got a year long subscription to NBA League Pass for free. And NBA League Pass runs around close to $200 a year. So basically, I got a year subscription for $200 for free because I'm a loyal collector. So these kind of utility things are things that are, you can do it from a decentralized space as well.
Yeah, it's
So
like a
that gives a lot
loyalty
of,
kickback card application, but yeah, it's more, I'd say, verifiable with data. I'm not sure how the backend on Top Shot is, but coming back to that part on data ownership of the data, uh, I think for people listening, if this is a question you haven't thought about or are thinking about how the world is developing as such, uh, I think the option we have now is choice. We have the choice to either opt into one or the other, and you need to be self-conscious about that. And I would argue, I think a good person in the space to listen to, check out some of his work podcast is Robert Breedlove. He talks a lot about sovereignty, property, freedom, and he recently interviewed during Bitcoin Week in Miami Jordan Peterson. Peterson is a very renowned psychologist, writer, you name it. And this is one of the things they were talking about on, that choice of freedom, or can society live truly decentralized, or do you need that centralization? And I think it comes down to, you need to be able to decide that for yourself. And if someone is enforcing that on you, uh,
it
do
never
you want
works.
that?
It never works. It never works if it's
Yeah.
forced from either side. So I think that's the interesting part as well, and that brings us to a situation where people who are in power, what kind of power, whether it's political power or corporate power, and they want to move things certain ways, which still works, but not as much. So, and then you get the new kind of generation that approaches work completely different than the generations before them. So there are a lot of interesting talking points. And for me, it's interesting to see how technology helps develop those situations. Because if you would have told me 20 years ago when I started studying that I would be doing what I'm doing now, in a sense, I would be yes, that makes total sense, but I wouldn't be able to envision it. I wouldn't be able to envision the way we work now 20 years
And
ago.
yet, a few weeks ago, you were walking in this warehouse and you got that student nostalgia again of.
Yeah. So and I think that's also one of the more difficult things is, and that's one of the biggest worries from a societal perspective, is that people will get lost in kind of this second life kind of feeling, like they're completely disconnected. And we are already disconnected from a generational perspective. We already quite disconnected with previous generations, but then you also get a physical disconnection. So I think that's really the more difficult situation. Some shout outs from Anil and from Sharon. Also, thank you for joining in as well. And yeah, it's been quite a long time, but after a month we are back because I'm back from vacation. But Diego, you have some big things coming up as well. Uh, Based on what you heard about my 6 month kind of goals, how does that fit into your plans for the next 6 months?
Uh, I'd say it still works out. So I guess FeeCon is next week. Unfortunately, we are not going anymore. So if Jennifer is still here, we'll have to do a rain check on that
We'll we'll
meeting.
we'll we'll reach out. We'll reach out to her.
Uh, yeah, but there's still an option. The guys from the Netherlands are going, so that's cool. Uh, Having to see that update. The app actually launched today, so it's really cool to see that integration of ticketing. So I just downloaded it. I'm going through it just from a look through it from a technological, logistical point of view on how they're doing that.
Have
It's
you sold your tickets? Just out of curiosity, have you already sold your tickets?
No, and there's a reason for that that will not disclose live, but we can talk about it later. Other than that, so the rest of this week, I got some wildlife programming orientation week that starts next month. Yeah, 1 month from now. So if all goes well, I'll be able to travel for that for I think 5 weeks. And according to the planning, it's not set in stone yet. I will be on the West Coast, so we'll have a 4 or 5 hour difference, which should still work out with our regular timing. So that shouldn't be an issue. But I can confirm all of that once the official things are set in stone. So don't worry, social convos will still be here. Um, Aside from that, it's just exploring the space. I don't have much planned in particular for the last quarter of the year. uh, I'm just going with what happens, what I'm seeing happening. There's gonna be conference again in October. I assume social media conference, and another project I'm working on, Silicon Up with Rajiv. So that's also happening in
Yeah,
the
we
background.
saw. I saw the post on LinkedIn. Indeed, yeah.
So that's also happening in the background. And yeah, it's now the next 6 months for me, as it was actually for the past 6 months. It's really learning more, especially now that everyone's panicking, markets are red, everyone's fleeing. It's actually the time to learn skills. I'm actually quite getting more active in Discord as well, especially the impact theory Discords. They're having like every week like keynote sessions from the community, Unreal Engine sessions on building stuff. So I've been engaging with those. So it's a good time to learn new skills, I'd say, especially skills that could translate in the development of this space. You never know. So that's one other way to network. Yeah, that's it. I think last week, was it last week? Roanne, just shout out to Roanne from Barbados, also starting her podcast. So she invited me and a few others around the world uh, to be guest on our podcast. So it was the first time I was officially a guest on another show. So that was quite exciting, and maybe do a bit more of that. Getting some more, getting on the other side of the mic or the screen, so to speak. Um, What else
So
do we
I
have?
have a question about that. How did you experience that? Is it more difficult or does it go a lot easier because you're used to being the one asking the questions?
So it depends on topic. From my observations, if you speaking of Rowan, hi Rowan, just give you a shout out about our session. I think was last week, giving Sean Luke the updates, and oh, Rajiv also tuning in while jogging. Awesome.
Well, jogging, that's pretty cool
At
though.
this
Thanks
time,
for joining in as well, Rajiv. Yeah, I think he enjoys the quiet jog. We should. I wanted to ask him to share the road, but he shouldn't share it live, and also it's a little bit far away for us to do the same route.
yeah,
All right,
coming back
nice.
to
It was a pleasure to have you. You also gave me my first opportunity. So talk about a little bit about how that experience was.
yeah, so being on the other side, I'd say that there's two things I've learned, observed, I could take away. Is one, if you have an amazing host, they can just get the conversation going, right? Doesn't matter what kind of topic. Okay, in this particular settings, we had a wider panel, so it wasn't just one guest. There are multiple people. So from that perspective, it's also good to listen very actively to what everyone's saying to contribute to the grander narrative, but also be very articulate in what you're saying. You don't have to necessarily agree with everything, but just sharing your thoughts. I would say it's easier from a perspective if you're I would call it expert, but if you're well read into the topic, you can just talk about it, share your perspectives, and depending on the curiosity of the host or just the general audience asking questions, you can peel in deeper. As a host, you have to do the opposite. You need to go look, okay, what is, do you need to look for clarity? Uh, is the audience, what would the audience find interesting? Oh, this person said what? Did they say that for a specific reason? Sometimes you just say something, but you can't really express it yet. And then the host has to, kind of dig deeper to, oh, okay, he wants to say something, pick up on that, follow up on that to help navigate. So being conscious of that from the other end is helpful because you're more conscious on yourself on what you're saying. But it was a lot of fun. Uh, had a wonderful panel with a bunch of other individuals from the Caribbean. Got to know what they're up to, and hope to see you again soon. Again, Rowan, be it on your podcast or our podcast. Uh, it is time for maybe a recurring guest. So if you're listening, we can see how we fit that in because you also diverted a bit with your own business.
Interesting. I feel we have still have some time left to do a couple of overrated, underrated. What do you think?
Uh, yeah, let's. I got a few that we could go through. Uh, yeah,
You want to
got
start
some
first, or should I start first?
got some fun ones here, especially with what happened today or the last few
Oh
days.
wow. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Stable coins, overrated or
You took my
underrated?
overrated, underrated. Oh my god, I wanted to start with that one as well. But
You
I
always
think
do
we have
this. You
to.
you you tell me
We
go
have to,
first.
yeah, but no, okay. But I mean, I wasn't. I was hoping you would go with another one first. But then when you said this is something that recently happened, okay. So for people that are tuning in that are not so familiar with stable coins are kind of like packed coins that stay around $1,
Yeah, it's
and
supposed to be representative of $1.
yeah, and it's kind of often connected to either an exchange or an altcoin or a cryptocurrency, and then people can trade it in for that currency, and then they're sure that whether or not the cryptocurrency goes multiplies by five or goes down two
It
hundred
stays
percent,
one. The,
it
the
doesn't matter
parallel to the
because the stable
traditional
coin
finance would
stays.
be
Yeah. So
gold by, yeah.
yeah. I think it's properly rated. I think it's we need stable coins. I think it's good to have stable coins, but I also feel like people are overdoing it. We don't need if they're 19,000 if they're 19,000, the people might disagree with me on this one, but if they're like 19,000 different cryptocurrencies, we don't need 19,000 stable coins. We just need like 10 stable coins would be enough, I feel like. And I already see people bridging, like some networks are bridging their stable coins, which is, I think, the best way to go, if you ask me. But
If
what's your take?
from the top of your head, if you had to look at this, the popular stable coins are the ones familiar to you. Which
You mean
one?
Hive back dollar? I mean, for people have to understand, Hive back dollar has an average per year yield of 20%. And here's the great thing about a decentralized platform like Hive. People were just talking about it, and then people were like, okay, we can do it. Basically, we own the platform, so what's keeping us from giving a 20% yield? And they just gave. I mean, I voted on the thing, like together with the Hive community, like people got to vote on it, and I voted like, yeah, I mean, like, okay, we could go to 12%, maybe 12% is reasonable, like, okay. And it's kind of boxed into a kind of structured way of thinking, saying like, listen, in a time where the banks kind of aren't giving you any yield anymore, when you stake your money, it was like, can we really ask for 20%? Nah, 12% would be cool. And then it became 20%. I was like, that's that's pretty cool. That's really cool because 20% a year is more than 1% a month. It's like it's great. I think it's
Yeah, the
amazing.
big question
So
will
if
be,
you
will it sustain, and what would need to happen. But anyways, let
yeah,
us
so
cut it
here's
off there.
there because otherwise we talk about other topics
Yeah,
too much. And oil and gas prices, overrated, underrated.
I haven't looked at the recent. Did it go up again? So
Yes, it went up again.
I would. Hmm. I would still say it's underrated, and with underrated, I would mean underestimated.
The impact
In
of oil
the
prices.
Sorry,
The impact of oil prices.
yeah. Um, so I'm not sure how well you are read into the world economy and that, but from my understanding, at least, oil is the world economy is running on oil at the moment, and you have you have a lot of big players, and with what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, and was it the OPEC? Uh, Russia is part of the OPEC, I think, the group there. The impact that has on the world economy is kind of huge in the sense that all prices are pegged. We were talking about being pegged to another asset, are pegged to the US dollars. So all oil prices in the world are, traded in US dollars. So you have this kind of ripple effect that happens. And if you don't understand that impact, especially now with the inflation rising from the US dollar and sanctions coming to Russia, these other superpowers are kind of gonna detach from that. And this is gonna bring friction into the world economy. And I don't know how that plays out. So you can't necessarily complain like all prices are going to go up, because we are heavily subsidized here locally on all prices.
Yeah,
People
yeah.
underestimate that.
I think people don't realize that in other countries you pay twice the amount per gallon or per liter than you pay in Suriname.
Yeah,
I don't
but
think, but also in all fairness, if those prices, commercial prices, would be, yeah, we wouldn't be able to survive. I mean, the salaries
no,
have to go up
very much
a
agreed.
lot more
We're
to make
very
it.
much
Yeah,
agreed. But that this is like artificial market. I won't call it manipulation per se, but trying to suppress the market to a certain degree artificially. So that pressure in the cooking pot is growing, and if there's outside forces playing a role in that, and the aftermath that happens to a country like us, who knows what could happen. So that's why I say oil prices are kind of underrated. In people need to understand what's going on, and yeah, diversify. I don't know what capabilities an individual has or what power to diversify more, but I'd say it's underrated. You're right. Next one for me. Let's see. I wrote this down. Talked about habits already. You said you appreciate it museums more when you visited that warehouse. So I'm gonna ask now, traditional artists, and with traditional I mean like physical, creating physical art. Is it overrated or underrated that they stay into physical art, or should they blend it into digital?
Physical art is really underrated. I think it's really, really underrated because even if you go digital, people want the physical art piece, which is an interesting discussion because my mom this week, who's a visual artist, was like, "No, you don't understand. I don't want to make NFTs of my existing work. I want to make digital art and I want to sell them as NFTs." And I was like, "Wow, you're well over 60 and you're very much aware of where this space is going," which is really interesting.
Interesting. Tell us
Yeah.
more. Like, what was that conversation? I'm trying to imagine it.
Okay.
Well,
So
how did
yeah.
that conversation go?
So first of all, she's like, okay, this is so she has attended a couple of sessions on NFTs and NFT art now, and she actually mentioned a couple of things that were of her interest, but she felt weren't mentioned during the social media conference Suriname. I don't recall exactly, but it the subject matter interested enough for her to distinguish between the different speakers and also
Mm.
feel like, hey, this is the information that I'm useful and this is the one not. And I see my mom really just really doing this herself. She's also building her own website, which is also very interesting for somebody over 60 to build their own website. But I feel that's the way my parents are. So I think when I'm that age, I'm gonna be exactly the same as well. I'm
I'd
going
say that's
to,
inspiring.
yeah, I will be like, I want to figure out VR and augmented reality when I'm at that age that I can actually create that as well. But that was the interesting part. So I feel like if I look, and then you have to be careful because in some senses art is overrated as well because it's pure perception. Like it's a perception on what a piece of art is worth. Where I feel like it's a lot better with traditional art than with NFTs and with digital art because if I look at some of these NFT projects, many of which have gone to zero or close to zero in the past couple of months, I
Couple
feel
of
like
days.
I feel like we're really not yet where we have to be, but there is so much potential in this space. But if you would ask me what I would hang on my I mean, I'm thinking of owning an infinite object, like having an NBA Top Shot or an NFL All Day moment, kind of in like a digital portrayal where it runs constantly. I'm considering that, but I would still rather have like a traditional painting or artwork hanging on in that space. I think it's cool. The NFT display will be cool in my office, but like in my regular home, most likely it will be something more. personal instead of personal interest. I hope that kind of answers
Yeah,
the question.
very interesting. Okay, last one for you before we close off.
Okay, so yeah, so the question that I have, job security, is job security overrated or underrated?
Okay, can you unpack job security as being employed or
Having
having work?
having having a full-time job. How important is it to have a full-time job? Is it overrated or underrated?
So being employed.
Yeah, being employed.
Mm, because of our personality, mine per se, I would say overrated, but for the general consensus, properly rated.
Why do you feel it has to be different for the general consensus than it has to be for you?
Um, I think it has to do with a few things that people need to consider before either not having a job or trying a new career path or trying to do something different is how we're talking about security. How comfortable are you with security, with risk, with safety? As in, can you survive 6 months, 1 year to risk not having that security, so to call it. In a economic downturn like now with all the crisis, I'd say job security, having a good paying job that you're sure you'll have for the next 6 months is a must for most people, unless you're really sure you can survive the storm. I'd say the priority is to be able to survive. If you can survive in good times and in bad times, regardless of your job, then it doesn't matter. So that's why I say, um, for some, and in my position, I'd say it's still a bit overrated because in these downturns, it's an opportunity, it's a chance to try different things. Entrepreneurship is one. Learning stuff is one. Learning a skill that you'll see if people are struggling. It's your chance to learn something, given you have that runway to invest that time and energy into learning a new skill that you could say, hey, I could provide this skill as be an expert in 3D modeling or something. uh, Once the economy gets rolling again and the demand's there, and you can provide. So from that standpoint, I'd say it's. Did I say overrated? Yeah, overrated.
Okay, interesting. I think we have come to a close of, I want to say, the first episode of season two, but I know you don't want
Yeah,
that.
the first episode of season 2, but episode 65 has been come to an official close. We will be next. We will be back next week with social Confoes, regular programming time. So see you then. As always, recordings will be uploaded in the weekend on the website in case you missed it or want to share with your friends. Thank you guys for tuning in
Awesome.
again and have an amazing week.
See you next week.